before we begin Chapter 1, I want to welcome you to OFAD 218, which is spreadsheets. And I want to just kind of give you an overview of the book. You should have the Excel 2010 book that's has both levels 1 and 2. It's a benchmark series by Rakowski. As you look at the beginning of your textbook, it kind of gives you a play-by-play of how the textbook is set up, the different areas of the chapter, as well as what goes on at the end of the chapter. So I encourage you to read through those pages. Those are the preliminary pages. And then beginning on page 1, it talks about getting started in Office 2010, and those are just some basics of what your computer hardware consists of, and a variety of dialog boxes, text boxes, and some commands that if you're not familiar with that, again, you'll want to review those pages as well. And those begin again on page 1, and they go up to page 12. And then beginning on page 13, you'll see pages that talk a little bit about Windows 7, some of the new features with Windows 7. Also beginning on page 22, they begin discussion of managing files and folders, creating files, deleting files, copying files, and you certainly want to review that. Again, if you have not had any kind of basic computers before, this is a real good way to kind of manage your files on your flash drive or on your hard drive. I'm not sure where you're going to keep your student data files, but again, with the textbook, you should have received a student data disk that contains all the student files that we'll use throughout the chapters, as well as the assessments that are at the end of the chapter. So I would highly recommend that you copy the files from that student data disk to either your C drive or to a flash drive, either one, and then pull that disk out, put it in a drawer, use it only as backup. Your goal there is to get all your student data files on either the C drive or on a flash drive, and then you can manipulate those files, making changes to them and so forth. So that information about Windows 7 takes us up to page, 48. And then the textbook is divided into two levels, as you saw on the front of your textbook, level 1 and level 2. And each level has 8 chapters in it. And each level also has 2 units in it. So the first unit has 4 chapters, the second unit has another 4 chapters, for a total of 8 chapters. That's level 1. And then it starts over in level 2, again with 8 chapters. So it's a little bit different setup maybe than some textbooks that you've seen before, but there are still indexes at the end that allow you to look up subject topics for both level 1 and level 2. So you want to make sure that you review those as well. So as we begin, if you'll notice, I'm on page 1 of level 1. Unit 1 has 4 chapters in it that deal with editing and formatting documents. And our first chapter will take a look at preparing an Excel workbook. And an Excel workbook is basically a document. If you're familiar with Word, it's a file, it's a document, it's a workbook. Okay, all those terms are used kind of interchangeably, but Excel identifies its file as a workbook. So we'll begin on page 3 there. I always like to go over the objectives that are at the beginning of the chapter so that we kind of get a feel for what we're going to be covering. And you'll notice there we are going to identify the various elements of an Excel workbook. And we'll see not only on our screen but in our textbook the different names for the parts of the screen. We'll also learn to create, save, and print a workbook. We'll enter data in a workbook, edit data in a workbook, then we'll insert a formula using the auto sum button. We'll apply basic formatting cells to a workbook, and then finally we'll take a look at the help feature. And I would always encourage you to, at the beginning of every chapter, there's always a little scenario there that kind of gives you an overview of what goes into the chapter, and you can see that there in the paragraph at the bottom of page 3. And then page 4, and again at the beginning of every chapter they're going to give you model answers as to what we're kind of shooting for in the chapter. So these are the end results. You can see on page 4, project 1, 2, 3, those are what we're creating throughout the chapter. And this particular chapter has 3 projects in it. And then at the end of the chapters, and we'll go through this too, as far as I just will refer you to it, and hopefully you can review it yourself. But on page 60 of chapter, I'm sorry, not 60, that's chapter 2. But at the end of chapter 1, you're going to find a chapter summary, and that's found on page 28. And that kind of summarizes all the concepts. And that may be also a good place to review maybe before taking the quiz that will have each chapter as well. Those will be taken on Blackboard. Also, the commands review is found bottom page 29, top of page 30. Concept check, good place to also look at, review, answer those questions in order to prepare for your quiz. Also, I will be posting the answers to those concepts check probably midweek of every for every chapter. So, and then also notice at the end of chapter 1 on page 31, you have assessments that I would highly recommend that you complete every assessment at the end of the chapter, just to make sure that you understand the concepts that are being introduced in the chapter. And there's some visual benchmarks that would be very helpful again, and case studies as well. And again, you're not going to be turning in those assessments for grades or anything like that, but the more you practice, the more you review, the more time that you spend on the computer doing the various features and concepts, the more you're going to learn. So practice, practice, practice. I can't emphasize that enough. So let's go back to the beginning of the chapter, and I'm on page 5. There's a picture of the worksheet, but I'm also going to refer to it on the screen that you see before you. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, there's a quick access toolbar that allows you to add features that you use frequently. We'll learn how to do that throughout some of the chapters. Right now, probably the default buttons that you have on the quick access toolbar are your save, the undo, and the redo buttons. But you can add, using this custom access toolbar drop down arrow, you can add additional buttons to that quick access toolbar so that you can quickly use those particular features. To the right here is your title bar that identifies what workbook you have open. Right now we haven't saved this workbook, so it's just called Book 1. Then to the right, you'll see a set of 3 buttons. There's a minimize, maximize, and close button for the entire application. So if you click the minimize button, that'll minimize Excel and allow you to go to another application if you want, but it keeps it up and running. The maximize button, yours may be restore now. Since I'm using a demonstration software, I have to put it in restore mode to make it a little bit smaller so that you can see it. But when I'm in restore mode, then that becomes a maximize button, so that I can maximize it and fill the entire screen. And then the X, it will close Excel. Now you'll notice right below that are 3 additional buttons. They look the same pretty much, but these affect the workbook that you're in. So that'll minimize the workbook, Book 1 in this case. It'll restore it and also close the workbook, but it keeps you in Excel. Okay, so the top 3 deal with Excel, the application. The bottom 3 deal with the workbook. Below that, you're going to see some tabs, the File tab, the Home tab, Insert. These all change what ribbons are being displayed. So if I have you find a certain button on the ribbon, what I'll typically do is tell you, on the Formulas tab, say the Formulas tab, and then each set of these buttons are found in a group. So I'll say Formulas tab, Function Library Group, and then I'll tell you what button I want you to click. Or if I want to go to the Home ribbon, I'll say the Home tab. In the Font group, I want you to select the font size or whatever. I've got an extra group here that you probably will not have. This is just a printer that I have here at the house, so that'll come up, and again, it won't be probably on your computer. If your ribbon isn't long enough, like if you have a display on your computer that is a larger display than what the book is showing, then some of these groups will not show all the buttons within them. All the groups will be there. For example, if you look at the bottom of page 5 in the figure that they show there, notice they're showing the home tab. Okay, this is the home ribbon. The font group in your book and on the screen probably looks pretty similar. It's not quite the same. They've kind of changed some of the buttons around, but all the buttons should be in that group. The alignment group, same thing. May not be in the exact same order, but all those buttons are there. Okay, and one I want to just bring to your attention, in mine on the screen, I've got wrap text as a button. It doesn't say wrap text, but if you look in the book, if your window is wide enough, it'll show all those. Now, the next group, the number group, I want you to look in your book there. Your number group has what, 6 or 7 buttons within that group. Again, my ribbon isn't long enough, so I'm not able to see all those buttons until I click on the number group to expand it out, and then there are the buttons that you see in your textbook and probably on your screen at home or wherever you're using your computer. Same thing with the styles group. I can't see all the buttons, but if I click on that, that expands it out and I can see all the buttons. The reason I'm mentioning this too is your ribbon, again, may look different from where you're going to be testing. Okay, if you're taking the class online, you'll have to go to the certification center or to a proctored site, and their ribbon may look a little different. But what you can count on is they'll have the ribbons, okay, through the tabs, and they'll have all these groups. The groups will always be there. Okay, the groups will always be there. You'll have to click on the group. The buttons may not always show, but the group will be there until you click on the group. Okay, and if you have questions with that, feel free to email me or give me a call and I can clarify that a little bit, but it all depends on the display of your window. Also, below the ribbons, you're going to see the name box that identifies where your active cell is. You'll notice as I'm clicking here, it's changing. Your cells are identified. Actually, your cell is an intersection of a row and a column, and you always mention your column first and followed by your row. So right now I'm in cell D4. If I click here, I'm in cell A6, and that's identifying where you are on your worksheet. To the right of that is your formula bar, and that will obviously show formulas, but if you type in text, I mean, that shows in the formula bar as well, even though it's text. The drop down arrow to the right allows you to expand out that formula bar so that you can see all the information in there if you type in something pretty long. To the left of the A, right above the number 1, is the select all button. So if you want to make global changes to your worksheet, you can do that simply by clicking on it. Selects the entire worksheet, and you can bold, you can change the font size. All the changes that you make will be changed globally. So that's the select all button. And then I'm just going to click on a cell to deselect it. So you've got your columns that are identified. Notice when you get to Z, over here on the right, it starts I'm going to say numbering, but re-lettering. And there are many columns in Excel, and I'm sure it's in Chapter 1. I don't see that right now, but I know it tells somewhere how many columns that you have in a worksheet. I mean, it's lots. And then also rows go on forever. There's 16,000 rows, so you have lots of area within your worksheet to work. So columns are identified with letters, rows are with numbers. Lower left hand corner is your navigation area. You're able to navigate to different sheets, and by default you have 3 sheets in every workbook. Obviously you can add new sheets. If you want to insert another sheet, you can have, and there's probably a limit on how many sheets there are, and honestly I don't know what those are. But you can have additional worksheets within a workbook. Remember I mentioned before, a workbook is the file, the Excel file, but within this file you can have many sheets within the workbook. Okay. The navigation buttons themselves are pretty universal. The one pointing to the left with the vertical line on it will take you to the very beginning. If you had 15 sheets, if I clicked on the one pointing to the right with the vertical line, it would go all the way to the end to 15. And then the ones in the middle will take you one by one, sheet by sheet. Okay, it'll scroll you through those. To the right of your navigation area, you'll see a horizontal scroll bar. That'll allow you to scroll to the right in your worksheet. The vertical scroll bar on the right hand side will allow you to scroll up and down in your worksheet. So vertical scroll bars, horizontal scroll bars. Below the navigation area is your status line. Right now you're in ready mode. If you start typing in, that changes what mode you're in. So there's lots of different modes. We'll talk about those later. This whole status bar kind of changes depending on what you're doing within the worksheet. And then lower right hand corner is your zoom, or it actually changes the view that you're in. Right now we're in normal view, but you can go to page layout view and kind of see how that changes. And then finally the page break view as well. Okay, I'm going to go back to the normal view. And then the zoom control allows you to zoom in if you want to see things a little bit clearer. That does not change how it prints. It's only a change of what you see on your screen. So those are the parts of the worksheet itself. And again, at the bottom of page 5, you can review through that. Also, at the top of page 6, they actually describe the elements of a worksheet, so you want to review through those as well. I've identified bottom of page 6 the elements of a worksheet area. The only thing I didn't talk about was the fill handle, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. Fill handle is this black square in the lower right hand corner of your active cell. When I lay the white cross on that black square, it changes to a black plus sign. That allows you to fill text, formulas, all kinds of things, and we'll learn to use that a little bit later on. And the cell pointer itself is the white cross that you see in the middle. You'll also find bottom of page 7 commands for making a specific cell active. I'll let you look through those. Some of them you may use, some of them you don't. I won't ever know which one you use. It's just a quick way to be able to navigate within your worksheet itself. Then at the well, kind of in the middle of page 8, it talks about saving a workbook and some of the criteria that goes into that. This is universal for any kind of saving files, whether you're in PowerPoint, Word, wherever. So you may want to look through those. You may already know this, but just look through those so that you can kind of identify what characters you can and can't use when you save your files.